5 years is a long time to wait for a letter you already know is coming. I knew it was coming the moment my mother's funeral ended, when Arthur stood beside the grave in a suit that cost more than my first car and placed his hand on my shoulder like a man claiming territory. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. The weight of it was enough. It sat on my collarbone like a stone, and I carried it home without dropping it. I've always been good at carrying things. That's what Arthur never understood. He mistook silence for submission. He mistook patience for surrender. He mistook the quiet way I stepped back from family dinners and declined his invitations to sort out the estate together for defeat. It wasn't, it was calibration. I was learning the shape of the room he was building, measuring the walls, noting where the doors were locked, and waiting for him to make the one mistake men like him always make when they believe they've finally secured control. He assumed that because he held the pen, he owned the story. He didn't. The story was written 5 years before he ever met my mother, and it was sitting in a fireproof safe at a trust company downtown, waiting for someone patient enough to read it again. I found it on a Tuesday in November, 3 years after the funeral, while helping my younger sister clear out my mother's old desk. We weren't supposed to be looking for anything in particular. We were just supposed to sort through mail, file tax documents, and decide what to do with a lifetime of handwritten recipe cards. But when Clara opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a manila envelope labeled Estate Planning, Do Not Discard, I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement, not anger, something older and quieter, recognition. I took it to the kitchen table, cleared away the coffee rings, and laid the contents out like cards in a game I hadn't realized I was still playing. There were updated beneficiary forms, a letter from his financial advisor, a revised power of attorney, and beneath them, pressed flat like a forgotten photograph, the original 2004 Revocable Living Trust. I'd seen it before, back when my mother was still healthy, back when Arthur was still playing the part of the devoted second husband, back when trust felt like a word that meant something solid. I hadn't read it closely then. I trusted my mother to know what she was signing. I trusted Arthur to be what he claimed to be. I was younger then. I believed in the theater of good intentions. But sitting at that table, with Clara quietly sorting through envelopes in the other room, and the late autumn light cutting through the blinds in long, tired lines, I read it. I read it slowly. I read it the way you read a will when you're standing in a hospital hallway and you already know the news. Page by page, paragraph by paragraph. I almost missed it. It was buried in Article 7, Section 3, written in the kind of careful, unglamorous legal language that makes your eyes want to slide past it and move on to something easier. But I didn't move on. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. By the 5th time I wasn't reading anymore. I was calculating. The clause stated, in plain terms stripped of ornament, should direct lineal descendants be systematically excluded from trust distributions, access to fiduciary accounting, or material estate communications for a continuous period of 5 or more years. Absent documented fiduciary justification or court-approved modification, such descendants shall retain the right to petition for independent fiduciary review, claim the original trust corpus as structured at execution, and require full accounting of all asset reallocations, beneficiary redesignations, and trustee discretionary actions taken during the exclusion period. I sat very still. The refrigerator hummed. Clara dropped a stack of mail on the counter. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. I let the silence settle over the page. Then I took out my phone, opened the camera, and photographed every word. I didn't tell Clara, not yet. I folded the trust carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into my coat pocket. I drove home in traffic that moved at the speed of a man who already knows where he's going but isn't in a hurry to arrive. When I walked through my front door, my wife, Alina, was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. She didn't look up right away. She's learned over 20 years of marriage that some silences are heavy, and she gives them room to land before asking them to speak. I set my keys on the counter, took off my coat, and placed the envelope on the table beside her cutting board. She stopped chopping. She wiped her hands on a towel. She looked at me. I opened it. I laid the clause out between us. I didn't say anything. She read it. She read it slower than I had. Then she looked up, and her eyes did that thing they do when she's already 3 steps ahead of the moment. He's never shown you this, she said. Not a question, a statement of fact. He's been amending the trust since she passed, I said. Changed beneficiaries, closed accounts, stopped sending statements, cut me out of the family LLC, redirected rental income, all of it quietly, all of it legally. He's doing it by the book. She nodded slowly. Then she tapped the page with one finger. But he's doing it without telling you, and he's doing it for 5 years. She looked at me. You know what that means. I do. He thinks silence is consent. She picked up the envelope, closed it, and set it aside. Then she went back to chopping. When he makes the move, you'll be ready. I already am. I've been ready since the funeral. I just needed the paperwork to catch up. She smiled. It It wasn't the kind of smile you see in movies. It was quieter, sharper, the kind that comes from a woman who has spent 2 decades watching me swallow my pride and never once asked me to spit it out. Good, she said. Keep documenting, keep quiet, let him build the ladder, he'll hand you the rungs. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, because I was calculating. 5 years, I had 3 left, 3 years of carefully measured distance. 3 years of letting Arthur do exactly what men like him always do when they believe the gates are finally open. I knew his rhythm, I knew his tells, I knew the exact cadence of his control. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten. He didn't need to, he used paperwork, he used silence. He used the slow, methodical erosion of access until you started believing you were the one who walked away. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. I wouldn't walk away. I would simply stop showing up to rooms he thought he owned. I started the next morning. I opened a new file on my desktop. I labeled it Trust Original. I created subfolders. I logged every email I'd ever received from his attorney. I printed every bank statement I still had access to. I noted every family gathering I'd declined, every phone call I'd let go to voicemail, every holiday I'd spent with Alina's parents instead of his. I didn't do it with bitterness, I did it with precision. I was building a record, not for revenge, for clarity. Men like Arthur don't lose their power in loud arguments. They lose it in quiet rooms with clean paper and witnesses who remember what was promised before the promises were rewritten. Alina helped without being asked. She started keeping a separate ledger of our own finances. Not because she doubted me, because she knew that when the moment came, I would need to prove I wasn't asking for money out of desperation. I was asking for what was already mine. We bought a fireproof lockbox. We stored copies of everything. We told no one, not Clara, not my brother, not our parents' old friends who still sent Christmas cards addressed to the family. We kept it quiet because quiet is the only currency that doesn't depreciate when you're playing a long game. Year 1 passed like a held breath. I stopped responding to his quarterly newsletters. I declined his invitations to review the portfolio together. I let his attorney's letters sit unread until they expired. I didn't block him. I didn't argue, I just stopped participating in the theater. When he called, I let it ring. When he emailed, I archived it. When his financial advisor sent a polite notice about updated distribution schedules, I filed it away without comment. I was building a wall out of silence, and Arthur, for all his experience, mistook it for an open door. Alina noticed the shift in me first. She didn't ask if I was okay. She brought me coffee in the morning and set it beside my keyboard. She started leaving case law printouts on the dining table. Fiduciary duty, undue influence, trustee accountability. She's not a lawyer, she's a medical administrator. But she knows how to read systems. She knows how to spot the cracks in people who believe they're untouchable. You're waiting for him to overextend, she said one evening, watching me log another declined statement. I'm waiting for him to finish the sentence. He thinks he's writing it. He's just reading it out loud. She smiled. Keep going. Year 2 arrived with less ceremony. Arthur began redistributing assets more aggressively. He transferred rental properties to a holding company I wasn't listed on. He restructured the family foundation. He changed beneficiary designations on life insurance policies I didn't even know existed. He did it all with the quiet confidence of a man who believes the law is a tool he alone knows how to use. He didn't know I was tracking it. He didn't know I had printed every public record, every county filing, every SEC disclosure that mentioned his name. He didn't know I was cross-referencing dates with the trust's original execution. He was building a case against himself, and I was just the archivist. I met with a fiduciary attorney in year 3, not to file anything, not yet. Just to listen. His name was Daniel Reyes. He was 58, wore suits that looked like they'd survived 3 decades of courtroom humidity, and spoke in the measured tone of a man who had seen every variation of family greed and still believed in the paper it was written on. I brought him the trust, I brought him the logs, I brought him the timeline. He read it all. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just nodded slowly, the way a surgeon nods when he sees the scan matches the symptoms. You're sitting on a clean claim, he said, but you need patience. 5 continuous years, no documented justification, no court approval, no material communication. You've got 2 of the 3. The 3rd will come when he stops pretending he needs you to agree. I asked him what happens when he does. He looks up. You file for independent fiduciary review. You request full accounting. You petition to restore the original corpus. You don't ask for more, you ask for what was promised. The court doesn't punish arrogance, it corrects it. I thanked him. I left his office with a manila folder and a quieter heart. Alina was waiting in the car. She didn't ask how it went. She just started the engine. How long, she asked. Until the clock runs out. 2 years. She put the car in drive. Then we make sure he doesn't see it coming. Year 4 was the quietest. I stopped logging entirely. I didn't need to. The pattern was complete, the exclusions were systemic, the silence was documented, the trust was intact. I focused on my own life. I took a promotion at work. I helped Alina renovate the kitchen. I started running again. I stopped thinking about Arthur unless he sent a letter, and when he did, I filed it without reading it twice. I knew what it said before I opened it. More amendments, more exclusions. More polite language masking the same quiet erasure. I let it happen. I let him finish his work. Men like him always do. They don't know how to stop believing they're the authors. They don't know the difference between control and consequence. I learned it from watching my mother. She didn't fight him when he moved into her house. She didn't argue when he changed the locks on the study. She didn't protest when he started referring to her estate as our shared responsibility. She just kept living. She kept gardening. She kept writing letters to Clara and me that said, "I'm fine." Don't worry, she knew he was building a fence. She just didn't believe it would hold. I learned patience from her. I learned silence from her. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let a man talk himself into a corner and then watch him realize he forgot to leave the door open. Year 5 arrived without fanfare. It was a Thursday in March. The air was cold but not bitter. The trees were bare but not dead. I sat at my desk, opened the folder, and looked at the timeline. 5 years, exactly. No contact. No statements, no distributions, no access, no justification, just silence methodically applied like a slow drip wearing through stone. I closed the folder. I called Alina. She answered on the second ring. "It's time," I said. She didn't ask what time it was. She didn't ask what I meant. She just said, "I'll pack the documents." I met Daniel Reyes on Monday. I brought him the full record. I brought him the original trust. I brought him the 5 years of silence, logged, dated, cross-referenced, and verified. He read it. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and said, "You've done the work. Now we let the court do the rest." I asked him what to expect. He said, "Arthur will fight. He'll claim you abandoned the trust. He'll claim you were notified. He'll claim fiduciary discretion. He'll try to muddy the water, but he'll fail. The clause is clear. The timeline is clean. The law doesn't reward control. It rewards compliance." I nodded. I didn't feel victorious. I felt prepared. There's a difference. Victory implies an enemy. Preparedness implies a system. I wasn't fighting a man. I was correcting a record. We filed the petition on a Tuesday. Independent fiduciary review. Full accounting, restoration of original corpus, no demands beyond the trust's original language. No personal attacks, no emotional appeals, just paper, dates, and a clause that had been waiting 5 years to be read aloud in a room where silence finally had a voice. Arthur's attorney responded within 48 hours. Of course they did. They claimed we were misinterpreting the clause. They claimed there had been informal communications. They claimed fiduciary discretion had been properly exercised. They asked for dismissal. They asked for sanctions. They ask for everything men ask for when they realize the floor is shifting beneath them. Daniel didn't flinch. He filed a motion for discovery. He requested every email, every statement, every amendment, every internal memo, every financial transfer, every trustee decision. He asked for 5 years of silence to be translated into receipts. Arthur's attorney agreed to produce. They always do. They think volume will confuse the issue. They don't realize we already know where the bodies are buried. The hearing was scheduled for June. We had 3 months to prepare. I didn't spend them worrying. I spent them organizing. I color-coded every document. I built timelines. I drafted exhibits. I practiced my testimony with Alina until I could say it without raising my voice. She sat across from me in our living room, took notes, corrected my pacing, and reminded me to pause before answering. "You don't have to convince him," she said. "You just have to let the record speak." I know, good, because he'll try to make it personal. Let him. The court doesn't care about feelings. It cares about paper. June arrived with heat that clung to the windows and a sky the color of old parchment. I wore the charcoal suit Alina had bought me for our anniversary. I didn't polish my shoes. I didn't straighten my tie twice. I just stood in the hallway, looked at myself in the mirror, and remembered the man I was at my mother's funeral. The one who let his hand rest on my shoulder like a claim. The one who believed silence meant surrender. I walked out the door. The courthouse was quiet, not the kind of quiet that means peace. The kind that means weight, marble floors, high ceilings, doors that close with the sound of finality. Daniel met me in the hallway. He didn't shake my hand. He just handed me a binder. "Page 12, he said. "Start there, pause before you speak. Don't look at him, look at the judge. He's not your audience, the record is." I nodded. I followed him into the courtroom. Arthur was already seated. He looked older, not frail, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from believing you've won too many battles without realizing the war was never yours to fight. His attorney sat beside him, shuffling papers, whispering in a tone that meant they were already adjusting their strategy. The judge entered, robes rustled, chairs shifted. The bailiff called the room to order. Daniel stood. He didn't perform. He didn't dramatize, he just laid out the timeline. He read the clause, he presented the 5 years of silence. He showed the emails that were never sent, the statements that were never received, the distributions that were never made. He didn't accuse, he documented, he didn't argue, he presented. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. I didn't look at Arthur, I looked at the judge, I spoke slowly. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't emphasize anything. I just said what had happened. I said when the trust was executed. I said when the exclusions began. I said what I stopped receiving. I said what I didn't ask for. I said what the clause required. I said it like I was reading a weather report. Calm, clear, unemotional, the kind of testimony that doesn't beg to be believed, it just is. Arthur's attorney stood when it was his turn. He tried to reframe. He tried to claim discretion. He tried to argue that informal family arrangements superseded formal trust language. He tried to make it about loyalty, about gratitude, about the spirit of the estate. The judge listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't sigh. She just took notes. When he finished, she asked 3 questions, one about the clause, one about the 5-year threshold, one about documented fiduciary justification. Arthur's attorney answered. He stumbled on the 3rd. He had no documentation. He had no court approval. He had only silence stretched thin and hoping it would pass for consent. The judge didn't rule immediately. She recessed. We waited in the hallway. Alina sat beside me. She didn't hold my hand. She just let her shoulder rest against mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The record was complete. The rest was math. The judge returned 2 days later. She ruled from the bench. No flourish, no drama. Just law applied cleanly to paper, to time, to a clause that had been waiting 5 years to be honored. The trust's original corpus was restored. Full accounting was ordered. All beneficiary redesignations during the exclusion period were nullified. Independent fiduciary oversight was appointed. Arthur's trustee authority was suspended pending review. The gavel fell. It didn't sound like victory. It sounded like correction. Arthur stood slowly. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. His attorney packed his briefcase with the quiet efficiency of a man who already knows he's billing for a loss. We walked out. The air outside was cooler. The sky was clearer. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Alina took my arm. We walked to the car. She didn't ask how I felt. She knew. I knew. We drove home in silence, not the heavy kind, the light kind. The kind that comes when you've been carrying something for a long time and finally set it down. The accounting took 6 months. It always does. Forensic auditors don't rush. They trace. They cross-reference. They follow the money like water finding its level. They found what we knew they would find. Undisclosed transfers, unapproved reallocations, beneficiary changes made without notice, trustee discretion applied without documentation. The numbers were clean, the violations were clear. The trust was restored. I didn't ask for more. I didn't file for damages. I didn't seek personal accountability. I just asked for what was promised. The court gave it to me. Not out of sympathy, out of compliance. Arthur's attorney sent a letter in August. Quiet, professional, final. The trust would be administered per the judge's order. Distributions would resume per the original schedule. I would receive my share. He would receive his. The matter was closed. I didn't respond. I filed the letter. I closed the folder. I put it in the lockbox. I locked it. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The record was complete. The silence was broken. The clause was honored. Alina stood beside me in the kitchen that evening. She poured 2 glasses of water. She set one beside my laptop. She looked at me. You did it, she said. I didn't. The paper did. She smiled. Then she kissed my cheek. Then she went back to her book. I sat there for a long time. I didn't think about Arthur. I didn't think about the courtroom. I didn't think about the 5 years of silence. I thought about my mother. I thought about the way she used to sit on the porch in the late afternoon, watching the light move across the grass, saying nothing, just letting the day pass. I thought about the way she never fought him, not because she was weak. Because she knew the difference between noise and consequence. She knew that some men only learn when the room gets quiet. She knew that some promises don't need defending. They just need waiting for. I closed my laptop. I turned off the lamp. I walked to the bedroom. I lay down. I slept. The first full night in 5 years. The distributions started in September. Clean, automatic, unquestioned. I didn't track them. I didn't celebrate them. I just let them arrive like rain after a long drought. Alina didn't mention them. She didn't need to. We used a portion to pay off the mortgage. We used a portion to fund Clara's graduate program. We used a portion to donate to a local historical archive in my mother's name. We kept the rest, not for wealth, for peace. I met Arthur once after the ruling, not by design, by accident, a grocery store, a parking lot. The kind of place where men like him pretend they don't see you until you're already walking away. He stood by his car. He looked older, not broken, just adjusted. He nodded. I nodded back. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The record was complete. The silence was honored. The trust was restored. He got in his car. I got in mine. We drove in opposite directions. The street was quiet. The sky was clear. The air was cool. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to, he wasn't behind me. He was behind the paper, and the paper was done. Alina asked me about it that night. Did it feel like revenge? No. Did it feel like justice? Not exactly. What did it feel like? Like a door closing that should have been open all along. She nodded. She understood. Some stories don't end with shouting. They end with signatures. Some victories don't come with applause. They come with accounting. Some men don't lose their power in battles. They lose it in quiet rooms with clean paper and witnesses who remember what was promised before the promises were rewritten. I learned that from waiting. I learned it from silence. I learned it from a clause buried in Article 7, Section 3, written in language designed to make your eyes glaze over and move on. I didn't move on. I read it. I waited. I let him build the ladder. He handed me the rungs. I climbed. I didn't look down. I didn't look back. I just kept going until I was out, until I was clear, until I was free, not from him. From the belief that I needed his permission to exist. I never did. I just needed the paperwork to catch up. Alina asked me if I missed the fight. No, I missed the noise. The noise was easier to carry. The silence was heavier, but it was mine, and that's what mattered. Clara called in October. She didn't know the full story. She just knew the distributions had resumed. She just knew I was quiet. She just knew I was done. She asked if I was okay. I am. She asked if I wanted to talk. Not yet. She asked if I ever would. Maybe she didn't push. She never did. She's learned, like me, that some silences aren't empty. They're full, they're waiting, they're healing. I hung up. I sat on the porch. I watched the light move across the grass. I said nothing. I just let the day pass. The trust was restored. The record was complete. The silence was honored. The clause was fulfilled. I didn't need to say anything else. The paper did. The law did. The waiting did. Some men spend their lives building fences. Arthur built one for 5 years. He forgot to leave the gate open. I didn't kick it down. I just waited for him to realize he'd locked himself out. He did. The court did. The paper did. I just stood on the porch watching the light move, knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let a man finish his sentence and then watch him realize he forgot to sign his name. 5 years of silence, one clause. One patient man, one woman who kept the coffee warm and the ledger clean, and a record that finally, quietly spoke for itself. If you've ever waited for a door to open that should have been yours all along, you know what it's like to carry silence like a stone. You know what it's like to let a man believe he's writing the story while you're just keeping the pen clean. You know what it's like to wait for the paper to catch up to the promise. And when it does, when the record finally aligns with what was always true, you don't cheer, you don't celebrate, you just close the folder, lock the box, and walk away. Because some victories aren't meant to be loud, they're meant to be quiet. They're meant to be clean, they're meant to be yours. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever waited for a system to correct itself, if you've ever learned that patience isn't passive, it's preparation, then hit subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. The people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong, and sometimes the quietest response is the loudest correction.